Look out the window on your next flight, and really notice the shape of it. The window is not a square. Its corners are gently rounded, softened into something closer to an oval. You have seen it 1,000 times and never once thought about it. It is such a small, quiet detail that almost nobody ever questions it. Look around the cabin. The walls are straight. The doors are neat rectangles. The overhead bins are boxy. Yet the windows, and only the windows, are curved. It looks like a simple design choice, maybe just a bit of style, a softer look for a sleek machine. But that gentle curve is actually one of the most important shapes in the entire history of aviation. Because this shape was not chosen to look nice. It was written in tragedy. It was paid for with human lives. And once you know the story, you will never look at an airplane window the same way again. To understand why, we have to rewind more than 70 years, back to the early 1950s, to the very dawn of the jet age, when flying itself was still young and full of wonder. In Britain, engineers unveiled something truly extraordinary. A sleek, gleaming machine unlike anything the world had seen. It was the world's first commercial jet airliner, and it looked like it had flown straight out of the future. When it entered passenger service in 1952, it changed everything people believed air travel could be. Suddenly, the future had arrived, years earlier than anyone expected, and it was beautiful. It flew faster, higher, and far smoother than the loud, rattling propeller planes of the day. Passengers stepped aboard and were amazed. This was flight transformed into something almost magical. It cruised far above the rough, bumpy weather, sealed inside a pressurized cabin, gliding through the calm, thin air near the very edge of the sky, where the world below looked impossibly small and quiet. This aircraft was the future itself. It was national pride, a shining symbol of a bold new age of travel, and, like any proud design of its time, it had large, beautiful windows for everyone to enjoy the view. Those windows were big, and they were nearly square, with only slightly softened corners. They looked elegant, modern, and confident. To everyone who saw them, they seemed like a perfectly natural choice. And no one saw a problem. Square windows seemed completely sensible. They let in more light. They framed the clouds beautifully, and they gave passengers a wide, generous view of the world passing below. And then, in 1954, the unthinkable happened. Not once, but in a way that would shake the confidence of the entire aviation world to its core. In January, one of these jets was climbing over the Mediterranean when it suddenly broke apart in the sky. There was no distress call, no warning at all. Everyone on board was lost in an instant. There was no obvious cause, no clear explanation, only wreckage scattered across the surface of the sea. The finest investigators of the era studied everything they could find, and still they were utterly baffled. The whole fleet was grounded and inspected from top to bottom. Engineers searched for any flaw they could imagine, found nothing conclusive, and eventually the aircraft was cleared to return to the skies once more. And then, only a few short months later, a second one of these jets came apart in almost exactly the same terrible way, high in the air, far from any help. Two of the very same aircraft, torn open at altitude, within months of each other. This was no longer bad luck, and it was no coincidence. Something was hiding inside the design itself, something no one had yet seen. The jet was grounded again, and this time one of the largest and most determined engineering investigations in all of history began, with a single goal: to find the invisible killer before it struck again. Salvage teams went out to sea, and, piece by painstaking piece, recovered the shattered remains of the aircraft from the ocean floor, hauling twisted fragments back up into the light for study. Then, slowly and carefully, they rebuilt the broken fuselage, laying every recovered fragment back into place, reassembling the aircraft like an enormous, tragic puzzle until its shape emerged once more. Then the engineers did something remarkably clever. They took an entire complete fuselage, and they sealed it inside a giant tank filled with water, ready to test it in a way no one had done before. They pumped the cabin full of pressure, then released it, then did it again and again and again, using water to safely simulate the strain of many thousands of flights in a fraction of the time. Because every takeoff stretches an aircraft's body outward as the cabin inflates like a balloon, and every landing lets it relax again, push, and release, over and over, thousands upon thousands of times. After enough of these cycles inside that tank, the metal cabin finally failed. A crack appeared, and in an instant it raced across the structure, tearing through the skin of the aircraft. And when the engineers carefully traced that crack back to its very source, they found it at last. The failure had begun at a single point, the sharp corner of a window. The culprit was something engineers call stress concentration. When you stretch a material, force flows through it, almost like water flowing through a channel, spreading out across the surface. But at a sharp corner, all of that flowing force suddenly piles up into one tiny, concentrated point. Think of tearing open a snack bag. It resists at first, but once there is a small notch, it rips apart with ease. A square window is full of those notches. Its 4 sharp corners were 4 hidden weak points, each one silently absorbing an enormous, punishing amount of stress on every single flight. Every time the aircraft flew, as the cabin pressurized and then relaxed, those 4 corners were pushed and pulled, just a little, again and again, in a slow rhythm no passenger could ever feel. You could not see it, and no one could feel it, but with each and every cycle, microscopic cracks grew a tiny bit larger, invisible and patient, spreading deep within the metal itself. Until one day, high above the sea, the quietly weakened metal simply could take no more, and the fuselage tore open in a single, sudden, catastrophic instant. The beautiful square window had been the hidden killer all along, waiting silently in plain sight. And yet, once the truth was finally understood, the fix turned out to be breathtakingly simple. Round the corners. That was it. A smoothly curved edge has no single sharp point for stress to pile up against, so the force simply flows around the curve, gently and evenly, without ever concentrating. By spreading the load smoothly across the whole edge, the rounded window removed that dangerous weak spot entirely. The metal could finally breathe, flexing safely through cycle after cycle without tearing. Aviation learned this lesson the hardest possible way, and it never ever forgot it. From that day forward, aircraft windows were made curved, smaller, and gently oval, all around the world. Look closely at any modern airplane, anywhere on Earth, and you will see it. Every single passenger window is a soft, rounded shape. And now you understand precisely why. The lesson reached far beyond airplanes too. It spread into ships, into spacecraft, into buildings and bridges. Engineers everywhere learned to soften their corners, wherever stress and pressure might gather. So the very next time you fly, and you settle in and rest your head beside that little oval window, take a moment and remember what that shape truly represents. It is a quiet monument to a hard, painful lesson, a life-saving shape hiding right there in plain sight. So look again. The most ordinary things around us are almost never as simple as they seem.